I see. All right, well, thank you for coming today. We're here to celebrate the passage of the first phase of the mayor's development stimulus legislation. And with that, I'd just like to introduce the mayor.
Oh, Jesus, that was quick. Thanks, Michael, and thank you all very much for being here. In particular, let me thank the representatives of labor. We simply would not be here had it not been for our friends in the building and construction trade that believed in this cause, believed in this effort, and took it upon themselves not just to identify it as an issue, but to actually go out there and knock on doors at the Board of Supervisors, make a strong case, hold rallies, and make sure that people focused on this legislation. In particular, I want to thank Supervisor Gavin Newsom for showing immediate support for this legislation and then showing leadership early on that encouraged other members of the board to do the same. This legislation that we're formally signing today is a piece of legislation that arguably can directly impact the development of some 2,500 housing units, 9 different project sites, and generate some $894 million in spending, over 4,800 jobs, and generate some $22 million of general fund tax revenue without increasing general taxes in this city. That's how significant this legislative effort potentially can be. I don't want to oversell it, but I'm not going to undersell the significance of this either. Without this legislation, one thing we know is that not much would change. With this legislation, with the 9 projects that have been identified, with those thousands of units of already entitled projects, we believe this could be that impetus to defer these fees, some 80% of the fees from the front end of the project to the back end of the project, could be that impetus from the financing perspective to move these projects forward and create jobs for the men and women you see behind me. I want to thank Mike Terrio for his particular leadership on this and helping organize labor, and carpenters, and local 260. I'll go on. All of you guys, you're all here. Thank you for demanding some reforms. Thank you for demanding that City Hall focus on jobs. Thank you for demanding we focus on construction-related jobs. Thank you for holding our feet to the fire, and thank you for getting us to this point. Final compliment. Michael Yarney has just done a masterful job from day one, and he has been the impetus for a series of other legislative initiatives, including a new Mello-Roos proposal that would create a communities facilities district to finance the infrastructure-related development of projects throughout the city. This is phase 2 of some of our local development stimulus legislation that we're also going to be formally introducing to the Board of Supervisors. And I want to thank again Gavin Newsom for his leadership and stewardship and his support for the same. This proposal as well will create jobs and create revenue for the city without the traditional burdens of going out and increasing taxes to hardworking men and women. So we think this is very positive and enlightened legislation. It's part of the narrative of some of our local stimulus legislation that we have been arguing for and fighting for. And I'm hopeful that the affordable housing stimulus and the deferral fee can also get the same kind of reception eventually with the amendments we're making that the legislation we're signing today has already received. So thank you all very much for being here, and thank you, Michael, again for your stewardship, and Supervisor Duffy and all the friends in building and construction trades.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to invite up Supervisor Duffy, who is the co-sponsor of the stimulus legislation.
Thank you, Michael. Just briefly, people say it's tough to build in this town, and I think thanks to the mayor and the construction and building trades, it's going to get a little easier, and the process, I think, is going to be a little fairer and more transparent to people. What really moved us at City Hall is that the leadership you see behind you and the men and women that work in the building and construction trades are hurting right now. and the city has a responsibility to help people get to work, as the mayor said, to put jobs on the table and to help move the economy of this city forward. And the package that is being signed today, I think, is an incredible move in that regard. I am proud to be co-sponsoring the mayor's measure today at the Board of Supervisors that would allow us to establish a Mello-Roos, and that thereby there would be tax-exempt bond financing available for some of the city infrastructure improvements that are required for development around the PUC, roads, things of that sort. Again, another step to move it. I just want to say that being here at One Rincon, it is amazing. I mean, how I think that we have created a whole new ability to live in this city in an amazing way, to experience the vitality of downtown, and that the One Rincon people say they can't wait to build the second tower and that they're committed to it. So again, I just want to thank the mayor for his leadership, and definitely the men and women of building and construction trades. They need our help, and I think the city is keeping faith today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. And with that, I'd like to invite Michael Theriault up, who is the Secretary-Treasurer of the San Francisco Building and Trades. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. You know, the clouds are in, the rain is threatening, the wind is blowing, it's chilly, and it's a beautiful day. It's a beautiful day because we're a little bit closer to putting folks back to work. And let me tell you a little about what that means. We have been suffering now 25, 30, 35, up to 40% unemployment in the trades for more than a year. Just imagine, and you shouldn't take much imagination, just imagine what that does to human lives, what that does to families. It has gotten to the point where I meet people I knew and dispatched as an ironworker dispatcher some years ago, good hands, living out of their backpacks on the street of San Francisco. That is where we are. This measure doesn't cure that ill, but it brings us a step closer to putting those folks back to work. Any one of these folks behind me, business agents and business representatives for the various unions of the building trades, can tell you similar stories to what I can tell you. And they can tell them because more than I can, because they see these individuals in their halls every day. They see the desperation that they've arrived at. They hear about the homes lost, the health care lost, the families breaking up. That is where we are. That is where we've been for a while now. And hopefully, the economy turns around a little bit. Housing prices come up just a hair. Banks begin to lend a little bit. And then with this measure in place, and hopefully also the affordable housing measure in place, these projects can happen much more quickly and put us back to work. So my thanks to the mayor, my thanks to Michael Yarney, my thanks to Supervisor Dufty, and my thanks to the Board of Supervisors for helping us out in this regard. My last name is spelled Theriault, pronounced Theriault. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael. And I would say that it would be an impossible task to get through the Board of Supervisors, but for the support of the building trades, and they've been a terrific partner in our effort to stimulate the economy. And with that, I would like to invite a representative of the developer of Rincon Tower 2. And Rincon Tower 2 is slated for this vacant site right next to this beautiful outdoor patio, and it's Mark Babson representing Rincon Tower 2.
Thank you, Michael. I'm Mark Babson. I'm a principal at Emerald Fund. We're San Francisco housing developers. We act as development consultants on One Rincon. As many of you know, the developers of One Rincon, of this tower behind us, and hopefully the tower over there, are Mike and David Crozier. They're working hard to try to figure out a way to get the second tower built. This legislation that Mayor Newsom is going to sign today will help advance that, help bring forward the time period when Tower 2 can start and other residential projects can start in San Francisco. Currently, development projects don't pencil. And what this means is that to get construction started, you need to have a pro forma that has a project margin. This project margin needs to be sufficient so that lenders lend and equity investors invest. There are three different components to a project margin. There's revenue, how much will condos sell for? There's construction costs, and there's soft costs, things like impact fees and interest. To get from today's world where there's no new construction to tomorrow's where there hopefully is, some combination of those three factors have to shift. Either projected housing prices have to go up or costs need to go down. This legislation and the proposed affordable inclusionary legislation will help bring costs down. It will lower soft costs and make construction start that much earlier. To give an example, let's use Tower 2. Tower 2 is ready to go. It's 299 units. It's completely entitled. It's got a full set of construction documents. All it needs is to pencil, and it doesn't do that yet. The combined impact of the deferred fees of this legislation and the inclusionary transfer fee that's being proposed would bring $19 million of savings, $19 million to Phase 2. Almost all of that is an interest expense. What that translates to is $62,000 per housing unit. Looking at it a different way, this means construction can start when housing prices are $62,000 less expensive per unit than would be needed today. That's a pretty big impact. Overall, this $18 million, it probably expedites things about 2 years. And let's look at the impacts for the city if Phase 2 happens. Number one, jobs. There'll be approximately 800 union construction jobs created. Number two, fees. Phase 2 will pay $18 million in fees. And finally, three, property taxes. A new condo tower here will pay $3.2 million more than the vacant piece of land is right now. This is an annual payment. So if project starts 2 years earlier, we're looking at $6.4 million extra dollars. So the development community, the building community, would like to commend the mayor and the board for this first step for this legislation, and we urge them to find a way to get the second piece going so we can start building. And hopefully we'll have everyone back for a groundbreaking here at Phase 2. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Really appreciate those facts. We have one final speaker, which is David Crizaire, who's the developer of Rincon Tower 1 and the future developer of Rincon Tower 2. David, you wanted to say a few words.
Good morning. David Crizaire with Urban West Associates, the developer. We're very committed to San Francisco. Despite the worst financial collapse that we've seen since the Great Depression, we've gone ahead and we paid off our construction loan in full, $200 million. We've paid off all $20 million of fees to the city in Phase 1. We face this challenge with where the economy is at and where the fees are at, and what the mayor and the board and Michael Yarney have done single-handedly is remove one of those two significant obstacles, and that reinvigorates our commitment here. So we hope to see you all soon when we have a lot of guys here with shovels and cranes and all sorts of exuberance as we pull out of this terrible recession. Thank you very much for coming here today. Thank you again for all your efforts. Take care.
And with that, we're actually going to sign the real legislation. It's right over here. We have two ordinances, Mr. Mayor. You can just have a seat.
You all can come back here. Thanks, Dave Figueroa, for his This is technically 354. Yeah, this is that. Make sure it doesn't blow away. That's it. Happy to answer any questions. Any questions? Fabulous. No questions. All right. You want those developers back to answer your question, right?
Exactly how does this work, and how important would it have been to have that housing
Well, on the affordable housing fee, it's just one of a number of pieces of legislation we introduced. We think that's principle. That deals with the inclusionary housing responsibilities for any new developer that's developing new units, and this would provide a deferral on those by creating a new transfer fee that would be permanently placed on the property, which would actually generate more revenue for our Affordable Housing Trust Fund than the current inclusionary housing fee. The concern was the transition from the existing system to the new system and how we can fund that gap, which we're working with the Board of Supervisors on, notably Supervisor Maxwell and others that have expressed specific concerns. The Mello-Roos, the new financing that Supervisor Dufty will introduce, will, I think, be a very significant piece of legislation to help finance those costs of upfront infrastructure responsibilities and fees for new development. That, we think, is less controversial. I believe we have the votes, though. Who knows? Supervisor Dufty feels confident. He could speak for himself in a moment about the prospects of getting that passed. And of course, this development legislation now officially signed, and that should get the interest of not only the two developers, project sponsors that are here today, but those that are not. We've again identified 9 specific projects, over 2,500 housing units, already entitled projects, ready to go. Talk about shovel ready. These things could get going today. They just have a financing gap. This will decrease the upfront costs and reduce the loan and then debt burden, which is the interest that would be borne on the project, push it to the back, generate the support, we hope, of the lenders to actually lend on these projects and move these projects forward, generating revenue in terms of the stimulating impacts of job creation and the benefits to our local economy, and ultimately the project made permanent property tax revenue and the baseline that the project will develop. So without overburdening, I don't know if you have a soundbite in there, good luck. This is really innovative legislation. This is taking responsibility for the conditions, not pointing fingers. I mean, we could blame Sacramento, blame the feds, or we could take some accountability to try to do things differently. I think it's very innovative and very responsive to the conditions. I think it's among the most significant pieces of legislation that we have passed in the last year and a half since this macroeconomic turndown in terms of helping stimulate our local economy. And no greater stimulus than construction jobs, no greater stimulus than developing housing and improving your infrastructure. So this is where real jobs are created, real multiplier is developed, and real opportunity in terms of addressing the biggest challenge we have right now, and that's unemployment. 9 projects. Yeah. They are very supportive. They've been very supportive. They've been very patient. And I think all of them are looking at not only this legislation, but the Mello-Roos legislation, and looking also at the affordable housing as part of this. It certainly complements it. If we get all of this passed, I'm absolutely confident we'll have dramatically shrunk the delay in terms of time before these projects start their development. Meaning, rather than waiting 30 months, we could see things happening in the next 6 months. Rather than waiting 2 years, we could see things happening in the next few months. I mean, that's how important this legislative package is. And you heard, I mean, I thought those numbers were pretty compelling. This is not de minimis. This is real money. Again, the money ultimately is paid back. No one's getting anything for free. But they're ultimately not having to bear the upfront costs, which in this climate of liquidity and credit crunch is incredibly important. Any other questions on this? Fabulous. Thank you all. Congratulations. Keep up the pressure at City Hall.